As part of my research seminar project for Dr. Bueller's class at Missouri Baptist University, I was able to explore some of the differences and some of the impact that Christianity would have on American democracy and the founding of that, and then in inverse would also that newfound democracy would play in impacting American Christianity as a whole. This comes at a time after the Enlightenment where American Christianity reacts with the likes of great preachers, the likes of John Edwards and George Whitefield, by starting to hold tent revival meetings. And within these revival meetings, we see them addressing the culture and society as a whole from Europe, shifting towards the Enlightenment way of thinking, much more secular, and in the process of that, it kind of removes God from some of their findings. This is going to actually help rally the troops, in a sense, in America to stand up against the government. Because if we're no longer viewing the same God, or we're not worshiping our God the same way, then how is it, perhaps, that the man that we are following, who has divine right and who we worship accordingly, if we're worshiping a different way, and that's why it is that we came to America in the first place, well then can we not choose to do things another way? Christianity is going to impact democracy by these tent meetings within the First Great Awakening. Out of this newfound country in democracy, we're going to see that shift back towards Christianity, though, because things are going to no longer go the way of traditional leadership. Charles Finney is one example of this, as is Joseph Smith, and looking at Mormonism. But talking about Finney, we see the way that he is not actually classically trained through seminary or through Harvard or Yale, as was accustomed to many of the preachers during that time, but instead, as he lives in the burned over district that meant and spent a lot of the First and Second Great Awakenings, he starts ministering there as was just a commoner, and diminishes the work of what God does, and from the evangelical theological, even holding to more of a sovereignty of God within an orthodox view, he starts to think that it's really just an equation. That if you can put the right things in, you do things the right way, then God's going to do something. Almost telling God what it is to do. And we see that things kind of continue out from there in the way that Christianity democratizes itself. It no longer is church leadership of tradition and old, but instead people just kind of make concentric circles, moving a little bit farther away from where it was at. Alexis de Tocqueville had something to say that I was able to find. He says, "It seems clear to me that the Reformed religion is a sort of compromise, a kind of representative monarchy, a kind of religion that may well fit an epoch, but serve as transition from one state to another, but which can never constitute a definitive state, and which is nearing its end." Talking about the relationship between religion and the model of government, and we actually see throughout the early stages of America the way that not only Christianity impacts the government, but then in return, as people continue to move towards a democracy in their lives politically, that same train of thought of how it is they practice politically is going to impact the way that they worship and the way that they view things theologically. This was the same thing in Europe, as everybody was underneath a king, and they were under a sovereign king. And with that sovereign king, they had a sovereign God. But as things go to a democracy, that they are no longer under a sovereign king. Instead, they elected the people who are in charge of them. They then also start to elect their beliefs. They then start to diminish the view of God. And in the process, democracy thoroughly muddies the theological impact of Orthodox and evangelical Christianity in the United States.